So I spent over $150,000 rehabbing this property. That drove another $120,000 in instant equity. And today I'm going to show you exactly how we executed the rehab step by step so you can do it too. I'm going to tell you what went right, what blew the budget, and plenty of tips and tricks. I promise you're going to pick up a couple of great tips and tricks while I share the strategy with you. That way you're going to actually be able to make money on your next rehab. So we went from a $380,000 purchase to a $650,000 appraised value. The $150,000 in rehab increased the value of the property by $270,000, which created a net $120,000 of equity we could keep. And better yet, after doing the refinance, we're actually clearing over $2,000 a month in net cash flow. We've done a video before talking about the BRRRR and STR strategy, actually with this property, the Derby flip. But this time we're going to do it different. We're going to talk about the methodology and how to actually make money with the rehab and take all the experience that we've done with our nearly 60 rehabs up to this point and make sure that you can do it too, because rehabs, they're still kind of scary. There's a lot of money involved. There's a lot of tight timelines. There's a lot of budget to spend. And the last thing you want to do is screw this up. So in this video, we're going to zero in on the one thing that's going to make you money for the rehab: how to manage the process, the contractors, and the details that actually drive profit and save you time. So here's a quick recap of the Derby flip itself. So we bought it for $380,000, and luckily we didn't know this at the time. We knew it had the potential to hit $650,000 in value, but we knew it could be $600 to $650. So there was a gamble there. Luckily, it came in at $650. We spent $150,000 in total repair and rehab. Demo, trees, new driveway, new furnishing, all new bathrooms, paint, fixtures, electric, plumbing, you name it. So here's what we did: $10,500 in tree removal. Yes, there was a lot of trees. $12,000 to extend and redo the driveway. $38,000 in labor from our new GC. $30,000 in materials. $39,000 in furnishing. We went from death trap trees and a dated interior to what the appraiser is now calling it one of the nicest ranches he's ever seen in the area. So here's the process behind that transformation. Now, just so you know, when it comes to process, it almost always starts with your demo day. You're going to have to get everything ripped out, everything that's ugly and bad, you got to get it done. Then you're going to want your permits, you want to get your electric, your plumbing, and everything situated so you get your building permit going, because that's the right way to do it, I promise you. Now, after that, you got to get everybody moving, which means you're actually not only doing the quotes, you're actually hiring and executing the work to get started. And you have to go in order, because you can't put new tile on a bathroom that hasn't ripped out all the old tile, right? You have to do it in an order of operations. So here we are, focusing on the 5 most important things that are going to drive profit first. These are the execution moves that separated this deal from the dozens of others that probably don't pencil. These aren't just steps on a checklist. These are profit levers that you can move on the next rehab project you take on and make sure you are going to find success and a positive outcome. Step 1, eliminate the biggest barriers first. Before we even stepped inside, we decided let's handle the things that are scaring most buyers off, which is the fact that there are death trap trees in the backyard that are held together literally by wires to keep from falling down. So we're like, let's get rid of that. And also, what's the other issue? These trees are blocking the ability to put in a full-length driveway all the way to the back. It's another thing that we felt that we needed to handle ASAP. Now we got over 7 quotes just for the trees, some as high as like $30,000, $40,000, which kind of blew my mind. We finally found a solid team that was worth a shot, and they did it for $10,500. And guess what? From now on, they can take my money anytime. They crushed it. They were great. They're respectful. They helped clean up. Those are the things that you want to find, especially when you're working with big level tree removal, because all of them don't also include the stump grinding and removal. And that's something you always want to check. So automatically going through over 7 contractors just to find the right one for this job saved me over $15,000. That's a big savings. And not only did it save me money, it made it so this property is actually going to be something simple and more easily bought for the next person. In fact, I could have stopped working on the property probably right then after adding the new driveway and the new trees, and somebody would have bought it for a profit already. So the key takeaway is tackle the ugly stuff, the hard stuff that nobody else wants to handle. This is where the true profit lives. Step 2, always handle all the rough reworking early. When we got in here, there were some weird fake walls they had put up, weird cabinetry made into walls, and we were like, this is completely disturbing the flow of the property, and it just didn't feel like a very comfortable layout. So we're like, let's remove these cabinets, let's move this wall, let's open this up, and I think we can make this really nice. So first off, we had to demo those walls, demo the cabinetry that were blocking some things. And after you get the demo done, then you got to make sure you reframe it. You got to consult with your HVAC team, your mechanical team, your electric, and your plumbing simultaneously. You have to make sure you're framing it in a way that will still pass code and work with all the other features that you have going on in the house. And sometimes it's just best to get with an architect if you're a little too early in the stage to be moving around stuff. Because trust me, you never want to go back to fixing or moving stuff around again after you've already done your paint and your finish work, because you're wasting wasting time, you're creating a lot of dust and a lot more cleaning. Get all the dusty, disruptive work done first thing. Now, step 3, create value through the layout, not luxury. And here's my point here. I don't know if you've ever been in a house where all the finishes are awesome and it looks really great, but the layout still is garbage. Like, you don't want to live there. It just feels awkward no matter what you do. Like, each room might look good, but it just doesn't make sense. And that's exactly the difference I'm talking about. If you have the layout right, you can always add the luxury later. So yeah, we removed that back wall of weird cabinets. That was not helping anything. And then we said, since we're creating these different zones and potentially even a master bedroom, what else can we do to make sure each zone looks great, these living rooms? We actually ended up with 3 living room areas. How do you make them unique so people actually feel like, oh, I would do this here, that there, and probably something like this over here? You have to be intentional with what you do, especially even with the furnishing. And this is where the Airbnb game comes into play. I wanted, 1, a living room that was very functional and still felt like a nice, cozy place to watch TV by the fire, kind of relaxed, but still felt elevated. 2, I wanted a place that could double as maybe additional dining room, game room, and maybe even just a nice place to have a drink and enjoy the night as it sets and jump back and forth between the hot tub and having a good time and entertaining people. And 3, I wanted a game room. I wanted something where people could play pool, arcade games, or watch TV and just be a little louder, so we put that in the basement. We weren't just upgrading finishes. We were rethinking how people should use the space. That's how we made the home feel more like a boutique stay rather than just a flip. Layout is a profit driver, not just for flips, but also STRs. When you know how to do a rehab and improve the property for both the flip value as well as the STR function, then you win on both arenas. People want flow and function. They want to feel a vibe. They want to feel called to be there. If you can do that and execute on that, you win. Step 4, focus on high impact areas, usually the higher traffic areas or the places that you really don't want to spend a lot of time and money rehabbing. And guess what? It's not the bedroom, although you should make the bedroom look quite nice. When it comes to flipping, people want to make sure the money was spent in the kitchens and the bathrooms. So we did those. The bathrooms are all new, they're all decked out, semi-unique tile choices, and it really made them pop. Created a lot of cool contracts that made it feel modern, and especially in a neighborhood that had just kind of always been behind the trend, it was a nice change. Now the kitchen I was actually struggling with because the cabinets were actually still in great shape, and I wasn't really going to do anything to really improve that layout. We got rid of the weird wall of extra cabinets that weren't really doing anything. We said, let's keep these. Let's throw some nice quartz countertops on, new faucet, new sink, and then we said, let's add a nice new backsplash that's a little bit more modern but still has a warm vibe to it. We added new golden pulls to the cabinets and doors. We added a nice contrast and warm and friendly paint with a cool contrasting wallpaper. What we did was we layered texture along with warm design trims to make sure people said, dang, each room is kind of a vibe. And that's what we want. We want to feel like, hey, this is special, this is different, and I want it for myself. And I think when you create that, it's clear that people are drawn to it. We didn't splurge on everything. We splurged strategically. When we did the tile in the kitchen, we went from the base cabinet all the way to the ceiling. When we did it in the showers, the bath, we did it from the tub or the shower floor all the way to the ceiling. We made sure everything looked good and well done. Nothing looked skimped on. These extra couple $100 that you spend to do that will really help complete the full view of it being done well, and it won't feel like it kind of missed in certain areas. And that's what you don't want to create. You don't want to create opportunities for them to tell you, yeah, but they missed here. If you miss anywhere, pick the wrong mirror, which we did actually. And the cool thing about a mirror is it's very easy to replace for 100 to 200 bucks and people are happy again. The key takeaway is this: you don't need luxury everywhere. Just enough to catch the eye and set the tone. Step 5, don't compromise on core trades or tradesmen. One of the biggest mistakes I made on this rehab was when I hired this new GC, he wanted the whole project. Very common. Now the issue was, he said, I want to do the paint, I want to do the flooring. And honestly, I love my paint guy and I love my flooring guy. And I was really torn on this, and I messaged them. I said, hey, are you good if I don't use you on this? I know that was the plan. And I think I offended them a little bit because it can be a little funky when you quoted it and you take it away. But it was kind of one of those tough parts where my main GC that was going to be handling the kitchens and baths couldn't do it anymore. And then I said, okay, I got to change up the game a little bit. I compromised. Now, the compromise was somewhat a benefit because it ended up being a really good contractor overall, especially for finish and framing work. However, they were still not great at plumbing and electrical, which I still had to hire out directly to my own subs. I would say the paint, it was about a B. It would have been probably done more to my liking if I'd used my main guy, who I ended up actually calling in to do some touch-ups later on anyway. And my flooring, honestly, I think it was a C+ flooring job. I think we could have saved money, would have had less waste. And when you're using LVP, you got to know that the subfloor has to be very flat, very level, very strong. Otherwise, you'll have these soft spots that really make it feel subpar. I know where they are because I've been in every inch of that house, and it bugs me whenever I walk on them. Most people can't tell, but that's just one of those things for me that as the quality of product I want to create was not met. So this experience reminded me just how important using your A-Team is. A great finish and feel. I know that sounds ridiculous, but the way it walks, the way it touches, it matters. Because if anything feels janky, you're going to get that feedback one day, and it will not help you sell that home. If your guest comments on it or the appraisal notices it, it's going to lower your value. That's what you never want to have happen. A great finish makes everything else look better. A bad one drags it all down, no matter how well you did on the lighting, the layout, or staging. So now I want to share with you some rehab execution rules that should definitely make it easier on you when you get to your next project. These are the principles that helped us turn this generally complex, pretty expensive project into a highly profitable, high equity asset. If you apply these to your next rehab, you are very likely going to come out on a positive note, and I think you'll be very thankful. So here's the truth. There's no one-size-fits-all payment structure for any contractor, but you do need a system that's going to help protect your downside. For most of our projects, especially when we're working with a new contractor we haven't worked with before, we're typically going to start them off with 10 to 20% of the project total of whatever they're responsible for. Something that's going to cover kind of a deposit to cover the materials and any of that initial labor and setup that they're going to need to know that, hey, you're serious, but also I'm not going to give you 100% of the budget so you can go run off on me later. Ask me how I know. You want to get something that gets the momentum going without making you overexposed. Now, new contractors are typically going to ask for money up front. That doesn't mean they're shady, but it does mean that they want to make sure that they're going to have money to get this thing moving so they're not gridlocked and money poor. And they want to also make sure that you are not a scammer and you actually have money available in your bank. Offering a small or reasonable material deposit is a great way to start that conversation and get it moving. But let me be clear, I would never pay 100%, not even 50% to kick any kind of job off. It's just not something I would do. Now, if it's to remove trees, maybe. But typically what happens is it's done in a day or two and I pay the full amount right after that point is done. But on longer run projects, when there's a longer element of timeline that you have to deal with to get a job completed, typically people are gonna want some money. If it's just a bathroom, they're gonna charge you, let's say, $12,000. They might need $3,000 to $4,000 to kick that thing off. But for flooring, they might want 50% of that flooring material up front to get it to the site and then start installing, because half of it might be labor. Because half of it alone might be the labor. So as long as you're getting the product in the house safely, there's an argument that makes that worthwhile. Now, sometimes they'll have you actually call up the contracting warehouse and go, hey, this is Home Depot. I have $3,500 in flooring going to you. Do you want to pay over the phone or what? And you can make that decision on your own. But once they have all that flooring, they're going to get it transported to your house. Once it's in your house, technically there's no risk. Now you can pick up that stuff too and just bring it to your house on your own, and then you can just pay them the labor difference. There's a lot of ways this can be worked. I personally don't have the time to pick up that many £1,000 of flooring. It's just not worth it to me. I got a guy I trust, I use them, and that's it. Well, I promise you this, no matter what terms you guys come up with, it's 100% negotiable. They might say, hey, they want 30 to 50% up front, and say, hey, I don't feel comfortable with that. How about I buy the material and I'll get it on site, and then you can do the labor, and then I'll pay you your labor difference. And every time you finish a key milestone, 25% completion of the project, and we can define what that is, then I'll pay you that. But never pay everything up front, because I'm telling you, if you have an issue in the end, they won't come back and fix it. Or at least I've seen that. They don't. There's a lot of good contractors out there, but there's also an equivalent amount of sleazeballs, and that's what makes it tough. And that's pretty much my last piece, which I just kind of hit on. As you get toward the end of the project, you never want to have paid for something you still have 10 to 25% more to go. You don't pay that last quarter to 10% unless it's complete. You have to have something in reserves for the final walkthrough checklist point where you go, hey, I agree, everything is completed. Here's that final payment I'm rendering now. And frankly, it's just fair that way, because if I kick somebody off with initial funds to get a job started, then that means here's your money to get the work started, here's the work. And if I'm at the last quarter of this thing where they're like, hey, it's all set. And frankly, I just think that's the fair way to do it. The point is, always be mindful of who you're giving your money to. Make sure you are in agreement on what steps are considered completed milestones, and make sure you just negotiate so you feel good about working with them too. Because a good contractor is probably going to be reasonable enough to go, here's what I've seen, here's what I've done, here's what I feel we can work with together to make sure that this project comes out well and on time. Because I promise you, when you get to the end of that project, there's going to be a couple items where you're like, hey, you need a honey-do list. Honey, can you do this? You wouldn't call the contractor honey. I don't recommend that. But if you have a weird relationship and you can have fun with it, go for it. But some of those things might be some paint touch-ups. Maybe you notice that some things are a little crooked, or maybe they didn't complete all the molding or trim work in a couple spots that are behind doors. That unfortunately can be kind of common. You got to look out for those things, especially when they're putting doors back on. You want to make sure there's no scratches or dents in the paint, the floor, the fixtures, whatever you did, because you're going to want them to fix that and remedy that, because you paid for a brand new product. If they're the only ones in there to mess it up, they should fix it. And when it comes to quotes, they may come in a little heavy, but you can still try to spend and remain lean. Typically, I'm going to recommend start by budgeting at the big box retail stores. Get a feel for what your costs for paint, your flooring, your fixtures are. Check Amazon, check Wayfair. Those are all good places to go to for materials. Then go to work and start hunting down a better deal. Pay attention to the reviews and why people are returning things, because that could be a big factor in why you like or dislike that product, or why it even lasts long. I bought some bathroom faucets in the past that were really cheap and they had great reviews. And after I bought them and I realized, you know what, they're kind of dinky on the install. They look great, but 6 months later I had to replace them because the internal components were pretty lame and like low quality. We started having some issues. We started having some leaks. At the end of the day, sometimes it's just better to go with a more standard, well-known company like Delta, because Delta tends to do a really good job with all their plumbing fixtures. And additionally, sometimes we get so caught up in trying to save a couple bucks that we go, oh, I found this great deal on Facebook Marketplace, or this used material from some other place that fell off a truck. Not always a good move, I promise you. I budgeted about $2,700 in appliances for the kitchen on this deal, and I had an opportunity to buy something that was $1,500 for very similar stuff, slightly used but generally good looking. I was willing to do that, especially if it was a flip, but because I knew I was going to continue to manage and own that property, I didn't want to have that risk of them falling out and not having a warranty. But one of my friends said, hey dude, you should just do it anyway. And I go, well, let's run the numbers. So if we had bought it for $1,500, we still needed to go pick up the items. And presuming that the items were even in good enough shape to be picked up, there was no way to test them because they were in a garage. So I had to gamble at the fact that maybe they weren't that good. Now, I've bought used appliances in the past, and I'd say 60 to 80% of the time, they work just fine and they last a few years, and that's good. But I didn't want to deal with that, especially when I'm running an STR. I need my stuff to work. Now, if I wanted to save the $1,200 to $2,700 versus $1,500, would I have saved it? A, I was going to have to rent a pretty big van just to get them moved, right? So that's going to be $100 for the daily rental off the bat. Then I'm going to have to pay some of my guys to go pick it up. Let's call it another $200 for $300 in it. And what else? Some of those people I was going to ask to do the work were the people working on the property anyway. That's a day less of work on the property because I sent them for a half-hour trip to go pick something up. It's probably going to take another hour to load, another hour back. So I've lost a few hours just with that. And guess what? I'm quarterbacking the whole thing. So let's say in general, my time is worth, let's call it $50 an hour. And let's say I spent 8 hours on this. So $400 for a day's worth of work at quarterbacking and making sure that they're doing things and also losing the work being completed there. Hell, even if it was half that time, it was $200 plus the $300 I just mentioned, is to save what, a few $100s? Does that really make a whole lot of sense? And to risk the fact that maybe one of those appliances is probably going to get replaced, that's another $300 to $600 to replace that? I don't think so. I want to have one person to call, and I want to be able to complain and tell them they need to go replace that immediately, because that's the value of that time that I would have been spending elsewhere. I don't want to worry about chasing down some random one-off person if something's broken by the time it gets to my unit. I don't want to worry about chasing down that person that I spent $1,000 last with if something's actually broken or wasn't working from the start. From now on, I want you to ask yourself, is that dollar saved worth that hour of work? Your time is your most valuable asset. You need to treat it accordingly. And believe it or not, your best subcontractors are not on Google. They're not on Angie's List. You can find some people that are well reviewed and maybe they've done a good amount of work. What you really want to do is you want to connect with the subs that you do like, get connected to their subs that they enjoy working with. Like, I went to my painter and said, hey, who's a good flooring guy? Connect me with a good flooring guy. I went to my good flooring guy and I said, hey, I need a new plumber and electrician. He's like, I don't have that for you, but I actually do have a great HVAC guy. Got connected with the HVAC guy. HVAC guy goes, actually, I do have a great electrician I can connect you with. Got connected with that electrician. And guess what? That electrician, I ended up finding out I'm friends with the same guy that's been a friend of mine for years and also flipping. Him and I started talking again. Then I got a really great roofer from that guy because it created a reminder that we have a relationship or doing things in common. And from that roofer, I got a great framer. My point here is it's always better to get a referral than to try to start fresh with somebody that has never been recommended or referred to you ever. I've done that before and it hurt. And sometimes it does work. Sometimes it's a great experience, but when it's bad, oh boy, it's bad. So when good tradesmen vouch for each other, you get better outcomes and fewer headaches. Rule number 4, I'm a little sensitive to because I've seen people overdo this. They standardize finishes. Rehab can be chaotic enough and you don't need decision fatigue on top of that. We used used to use the same paint, the same flooring on every project. And guess what? It got super boring. The same faucet lines, the same fixtures. It would speed me up for the shopping side of things. And sometimes we'd even get bulk discounts. And generally created more consistency, which adds to scalability. But here's the flip side. Standardization can start to feel so stale. And what do you do with stale pot? Pour it down the drain. You have no need for it. Nobody wants that. When you have something that you put a lot of money into that nobody wants, you are going to burn your dollars so quick. You will regret the decision entirely and you will never want to do it again. Some of the builders out there go so far with their templated decisions that it just looks like a 10-year-old flip, even though it just came on the market a week ago. It loses character, it loses interest. You need to ask yourself, hey, is my decision for design here going to go stale in the next 6 to 9 months? If it is, or you've been thinking it might, you need to probably change directions. Now me, I prefer to go a little bit more bold. I think people are looking for something different. And honestly, it really lines well with what I want to do with short-term rentals. People want bold. They want something different than their normal home. That's why we go so deep in the design. We want people to go, oh, that's different. That's cool. I haven't seen that before. I want to check that out. That looks nice. Anything that creates a quick, snappy judgment that makes people go, oh, I got to pick that. Of course I'm going to pick that. That's a win. Now, rule number 5, when you're doing rehabs and STRs, you want to do it for the value, not for the emotion. Every finished fixture and floor plan was made with the final valuation coming from the appraiser in mind. If we didn't make the appraiser and the next buyer or next user happy, we weren't going to have success. We had to make sure they are happy, not my emotional inner child. We weren't designing for our own taste. We were designing for value, the value to come. That's why we converted these open random spaces into intentional spaces. That's why when we saw this bedroom on the back that kind of had this open area, we were like, what if this was a master suite? It would probably be more attractive. That's why when we saw this weird, old, nasty, wet room in the basement, we were like, hey, what if it wasn't weird, old, and nasty and wet? What if it was a nice, clean, dry bedroom? We made it that, and now it looks like a great spot. And now this property having 4 bedrooms, 3 full baths, 3 living areas, and a hot tub is ideal. Even if we stop using it as an STR, most buyers can go, it's a really nice house. I want that house. And that's what we want to do. We found ways to create wow factors in the bedrooms, the living rooms, the kitchens, and the bathrooms. Something where each room, at least you said, wow, this is thoughtfully done. This is nice. If I had guests over, I'd be proud to show them my new house. That's what you want to create. Pride of ownership, pride in design, and you want to create longevity in the type of design you're doing. And you also want to make sure it's applicable for both the appraisal and the short-term rental. Personal emotional choices are going to kill returns. You need to know who your buyers are, and you need to appease them. You need to know who your guests are, and you need to appease them. That's the data we're seeking, and that kind of data, when appeased, will have excellent returns. So some final takeaways. You don't make money when you sell the property. You actually make the money when you buy it at a great price and you rehab it intelligently. Focus on doing the hard things that others are avoiding, running the tightest timelines you can, holding contractors accountable, designing for function and not fluff. The Derby deal wasn't just a good deal. It was a smart execution, and that's what made it profitable. Executing a profitable rehab isn't about luck. It's about systems, strategy, and surrounding yourself with the right people. Most investors lose money on the renovations, but it doesn't have to be that way. If you're serious about scaling short-term rental portfolios with using the BRRRR method, you need to be learning from operators who have already scaled to multi-million-dollar portfolios, doing exactly just that. That's what our STR Legend Mastermind is about. It's a high-level community for serious investors who want to refine their strategy, run better rehabs, and build long-term wealth with short-term rentals. If that sounds like your next step, click the link below to book your one-on-one and schedule a call. Flipping is a tactic. Wealth is an actual plan. We're here to show you how to do both. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps us out, and I hope this video was awesome for you. If you have any questions, shoot them down below.